Hi, my name is Audrey Torres, and today is part of my interview that I conducted for the series of this video. I called Human Resources, and I talked to them about what items they use for technology. One of them that they said they primarily use, of course, is the application. That they actually put the application online, which I knew that, but that they had to make sure that they had the proper information inside there, and that the technologist had to help them with that. They also mentioned that they use that application to filter, so they have several filters that are set up, and when they're having the filter set up, they had to choose those, and they had to go back and forth between the technologist and be able to have that put onto our website for Houston ISD. So that was the first thing that they mentioned that they use technology with. Another one obviously is that Human Resources obviously has payroll. So with payroll, they obviously input the data in, and they have reoccurring accounts throughout that are processed into the paychecks. And so a lot of the technology that they use for the income that we receive every 2 weeks is all through the technology, and it's data processed by people, and then it's put in. So two important pieces that they use most are the application process and then the payroll. They also keep an account information inside the system about people's salaries, obviously, and then also their years in service. So they keep track of the years in service, and they're able to make data entries into that each year, and then be able to output papers for people that are wanting copies of their service record. So those were two really interesting pieces that I learned about their processes of using technology. They went into a lot of explanation too, that there's so many different processes through Human Resources depending on which field I'm asking about, whether it be the financing or the applications, or any of that. But they also said that, when they do presentations, especially when it comes to like benefits and all of that, that they use a lot of technology. They have webinars. They have all kinds of PowerPoints that they put out. And then we have a thing called the Hub, which they have a community on so that teachers can join that and get information as well. But the majority of their information for the public is put out onto the Houston ISD website. Also on the website, each employee is able to use the technology from Human Resources by going into their employee portal. And in their employee portal, they will log in, and they will have their own access code and be able to get all information from TRS, their salary, their days left open for sick days or vacation days. They're able to print their W-2s from the previous year, and be able to have all of their information on their health benefits, everything, even the appraisal systems that we use are on that same employee portal. And that's how the appraisers for the schools go in and rate the teachers, and that's how the principals rate the APs, and all of that information is inside there. Additionally, inside the appraisal piece is how they calculate also how much student performance compared to how much of the other domains that are appraiser rated are calculated. And then that goes into them being able to figure out how much Aspire money, that's like a program that we have where people are able to gain like a bonus check if they score well with their students and their appraisal is good. All of that's calculated also through technology, which is on the employee portal. Underneath the appraisal section. So there's so many different sections throughout Human Resources that are actually on the website, and that they have so many departments that handle all different pieces of that important information. And there's different pieces of information that employees have that are on that same website through the portal as compared to what the public is able to see. So pretty much the whole educational system and all of Human Resources is ran through technology, and without technology, they mentioned that this would be a very hard process to do. It can't be paper bound like it used to be a long time ago. They really have to use the technology to provide access and information to all of the people who are employed. But also additionally is that instead of them having to constantly answer the phone and answer questions, on the website that they use, they have most common questions and answers, and that's enabled them to be able to also not to have somebody man all the phones all the time answering questions that can be answered by use of technology online. So we really are a technology-bound district, from what I've learned. I never thought about technology being in so many different domains that we use. You know, I knew that we got our paycheck generated. We were able to check our employee portal and all that. But even through the human resources directed me to the curriculum people for our district, and obviously all our curriculum is on the hub as well. And the hub is a computer site that we go to. It's called It's Learning, and it has all of the curriculum on there. All of the assessments that we're taking throughout the district are on there. And so all of those pieces that we need for our everyday classroom instruction are on there too. So there's so many varied domains throughout everything that we do on an everyday process, or any of our personal information that we may be able to need access to immediately is on the technology side of the internet, which is accessed through mainly human resources or through various parts of technology. So that was kind of insightful to think about so many different ways that we use technology in our district, just from the aspect of what we need every day. Okay, today I interviewed the maintenance department to be able to see how technology would better enhance their department. And one thing that we talked about was that they actually use the online registration information when we make a phone call in or we email in, and they keep track of the actual item that needs to be taken care of, as well as making sure that they document who took care of it or what the result was, what time it was handled, so that you can see the time length that it took from the time it was reported to the time it was taken care of. Then we get a report back that goes to our manager of maintenance, and he actually is able to tell all that information and share it with whoever, you know, made the information to him. So if it was a teacher that said that their air conditioning unit was leaking or whatever, he can tell you, you know, specifically when the information was put into the system, when the person came out and fixed it, and all of that. And then there's situations too where people say that their temperature in the room is not good, and so he can put in that information into the system, which either again is a call-in system or it's also a type-in system that gets sent in through like an email type system. And when that goes in, they can give him information back even if it's not taken care of, because maybe there was no problem. He gave me an example of one time somebody said that their room was at a hotter temperature than they thought it was. And when they came in and they did their gauges and tested everything, they were able to input that no, it's at such and such degrees, and that's why there wasn't going to be any progress or changes made. So that's one way, is to keep track of whenever there are any items that happen at school that are important and maintenance needed. They're able to register that into their system, and then they actually are able to tell what's going on and when it was taken care of. Another thing that he said he does with the maintenance for development is that he's able to keep track of his employees too, and make sure that he has them assigned to different areas. So he keeps a spreadsheet, and on the spreadsheet he's able to say who's assigned to what. And he also uses the calendar, which is on our Outlook system, which is our email system. So during the email, he has access to all the calendars of all the people that he works for in maintenance, and it tells where they're supposed to be or who's covering what. So if somebody's supposed to be covering a certain shift or a weekend situation, like when we're having Saturday school, he assigns people through Outlook, and it goes on their calendar so that he knows they're covering it, plus they know because it's on their calendar. In addition to that, they all have cell phones, and so that's a great use of technology because it actually feeds in from their Outlook on their calendar into their cell phone as reminders when they need to be somewhere, or especially like on the Saturday thing or different assignments. He also keeps track of people's hours that they work that are overtime, and then he submits those, and he uses a document of Excel for that. So those are a couple of ways that our maintenance program processes information, and then also that the manager uses that information. Okay, today I interviewed a couple of the workers that were working in the food area, our cafeteria at school, and I was able to get some information from them about how they actually use technology every day. I knew that they had the students put in the codes to be able to get their lunches. I just didn't really know how that whole thing worked. So they told me that it's on a system where the students put in their numbers to get their lunches, and that every day it keeps a data process of that, so the students cannot come back and do it twice in one day. And every night at midnight it resets so that they can get their lunch the next day. We do free breakfast, so the breakfast doesn't play into anything. So only once a day can they actually put their numbers in and be able to do that. And inside that system, it has a database and it has information on who has free lunch. Now, my next question to them was, well, how do you know who has free lunch, obviously? But they do the lunch applications, which can be done online through the Houston ISD website, which I never knew about that. I knew that a lot of the students filled out the paper ones, but they can actually go online with their parents and fill out the information and choose the school code, and then it's processed through the technology that they're inputting it into on their computer and sent to the main group of people who handle all the paperwork, which is at the district office for food services. And so food services goes through and they calculate all the information that's filled in the boxes for the application, and then they're able to give them access to be able to have the free lunch, or they might deny it, or it might be reduced lunch. They have a formula that they use, but they're able to automatically click on that program and say free or reduced or refused as far as the free or reduced lunch. And that's automatically within the next day that they're able to do that a lot of the time. Sometimes it gets backed up a little bit. For the most part, though, that when a student comes in and enrolls and they get online and do it, it's much quicker. It's within that day or two that they are able to get their lunch for free or reduced if they qualify. Now, if they do the paper process, they were explaining to me that could take up to a week, because not only does the family have to fill out all of the pieces by hand, they have to also make sure they filled it out correctly. And on the online version, it doesn't let you submit it unless you've entered all the data that's requested. But the paper one, there's lots of human error available because there's not somebody there checking over it. When they get the paper one, the students may take a long time to get it back to them, and it actually goes through the offices at the school, not the actual cafeteria. So the people who are actually working in the cafeteria never handle the lunch applications, and I didn't know that either. It actually goes through one of our offices that handles all the lunch applications, and then they have to send that information in to the system by data entry or by sending it in by mail if the data entry system is down. Now, for one person to have to put all that data entry in, or to have to end up having to send it all in, that's why it could take up to a week. So it's much quicker to use technology right on hand and to have people use it that are actually needing the services for the students. So with that said, they're able to keep track of who has the free reduced lunch, and they're able to, when the student logs in, the system automatically tells them on a digital screen whether it's free or reduced. And it also tells them if they've already used their number. Now, so my question next was, what if another student uses somebody else's number? Well, that's where the error comes in. If a student uses somebody else's number and that number's already been used for the day, then that student no longer has a lunch available to them because the technology system has stated that student already got their lunch. So there's no scanning, there's no fingerprint, there's none of that stuff. It's just a number that they're inputting in. When they do come up with situations like that, they express that sometimes they give them the benefit of the doubt and they write down the student's ID number, and so they can investigate that later. They're able to tell what time somebody inputted that in, so they can research if it was even during the lunch, because we have 3 lunch periods, A, B, and C. Another thing that I learned is that they also, when I talked to the manager in food services, I was surprised to learn that they don't put everything in for request for different foods and send it to the food services for the order to be filled by hand. What they do is they input it into their system. They have a computer system and database that they put that into, and it shows them what they need to order. It also keeps a calculation of how much of product they should have. So the manager mentioned that this comes in handy when they're trying to say, oh, we're supposed to have, 10 gallons left over of applesauce. And so, oh no, we only have 3 gallons of applesauce. That will also alert them that there is either an error happening or there's a theft happening. And so she's able to keep track of how much she's supposed to have for supply and how much demand there is by putting in the request for ordering. She also said that the process, when they're ordering, it only allows them to order so much of each type of food group or type of item. So they can't just order all meat, or they can't just order all vegetables. It asks for them to order specific amounts of each of those, and then it calculates how much they're supposed to already have in their supply. So they can't go and just order a whole bunch of just hamburgers and not ever order any vegetables ever. It keeps track of that so that they can compare what they're actually supposed to have in their daily balance of food per student. And to make sure that they're ordering accurately according to the guidelines of USDA and all that. Another thing that they also use, obviously, is the cash register. So those students who want to buy extra snacks or items, and we even have pizza there, they use that to be able to take cash in, obviously, and it calculates for them how much change they're supposed to give back. And at the end of the day, they run the register to see how much sales, and they deduct how much they originally started off with inside the bank. And so they're supposed to have that much left over. Another thing she also uses is that she's able to use scheduling methods in there. So she goes in and schedules the workers for which hours and which location they're going to be working, because they actually have 3 different lines that they use within the school for serving food. So she will actually schedule them, she'll print it out, and she'll post it. And she doesn't email them or anything. It's just always posted, and she always does that a week ahead of time. They also have a list of who should cover who if one of the lines is missing a person. So they run that for 3 different sections of the food serving lines. Another thing that she also, so that they use technology for, is that she has to turn in anytime that anybody's absent. They don't call into the system like we do for teachers with ASOP. Instead, what they do is they fill out a document stating that they were absent. She signs it, and she has to submit that. That goes through Human Resources, and Human Resources will then deduct the sick day, and they're allotted so many sick days per year, and so then it's calculated into their salary. She said also that at the district office, though, that they handle a lot more with the food services, and that that might be a good person for me to contact too later on to learn more about it. I did get a lot of great information from her, and I really didn't realize how much detail there was with technology in the food services section. All I ever see is kids just inputting numbers into the system and getting their food. So it was quite insightful to know that even in a situation where somebody is working as a food service worker, they have to know a little bit about technology, and the manager has to know a lot about technology to be able to process everything and to be able to handle what she does on an everyday function. If she makes a mistake on processing the food order, it could be quite possible the next day that we don't have everything that we need. So it's really intriguing how they handle everything. Every aspect of the school uses technology, and every aspect of the school is dependent on technology. The whole district is. Okay, today I got to interview for a little bit the PEAMS personnel at our school, and I didn't get a whole lot of time because they're really busy. They said that Snapshot was coming up, and that's supposed to happen sometime in the next couple of days. I think by Friday of this week they are supposed to have everything inputted so they can review it, because the real deadline is at the end of October. So they have about really almost 2 weeks before the actual due date is happening, and I believe they said that October 30th was the due date for the snapshot, which at that time TEA will look at all data inputted inside of the system, and that is where they'll calculate how many students they have that are like ESL, and that'll determine how much funding they'll get. So that was one big thing they were working on a lot this last couple of weeks, and that they have to have done in 2 more weeks, is the actual October 30th deadline for the snapshot, they called it. But some information that they did give me was that that PEIMS is called the Public Education Information Management System. So I've always heard of PEIMS, but I never really knew what it stood for. And so basically, it makes sense to me now. It's all of the educational management information that we would put in there, including public education, student demographics, academic performance, personnel, financial, and organizational information is what they told me. They also have 4 submissions that they have to do throughout the year. One of them is kind of like a submission 1, which is in the fall, like a snapshot. Submission 2 is mid-year snapshot. Submission 3 is in summertime snapshot, and submission 4 if there's an extended year, which is the summertime. They take that information, they have to put it into a common file for the data system for TEA to be able to read it, and that has a lot to do with our funding. So I guess I didn't realize how much data was involved with PEIMS. Originally I thought that they just, kept demographic information, or they kept, our data that we find on our chancery system that we have access to get student demographics and information on whether they're LEP or SPED and all that. But I didn't realize how much funding, and I didn't realize they had 4 different snapshot times for inputting, and that they had to meet those deadlines or they could lose major funding. And so they have a really important job, and no wonder they're always busy. They have different windows, like I said, that are snapshot dates, and each district kind of has their own, and some of them set it a little bit before the actual TEA site time is. And so, like I said, their next one they told me that they're having due for TEA is October 30th, and so they have just a little bit under 2 weeks left before they can make sure that they have everything in. For the submission mid-year, it has a lot to do with the budget, and the campuses don't really have a lot directly to do with this. It has a lot more to do with the district offices. They have different times that they can go back through, and they have like first submissions, resubmissions, and they're able to edit up until like a certain point. All this is like data entry information, and they have to check the CUME folders, the common folders that are for the student information, and everybody kind of has a part in this, because if the SPED personnel are not putting in the correct SPED data into our chancery system, and the ESL or LPAC is not putting in the correct information there, that will not feed into the data system that they are using in order to calculate how much of a population we have for those sub-pops. Additionally, all kinds of other information comes into play that they have to make sure they input. They also have to make sure that they run reports and verify the checks. And so right now, the personnel that I had talked to at our campus for PEIMS is going through and sending out a lot of reports for different departments to check their data so that she can make corrections to them before the snapshot comes up. And so, for example, I was speaking of SPED and LEP earlier. The SPED department got a list of who they were supposed to check and make sure that their students, all the students were on there, and what kind of services they were getting was on there. And that could go back later to funding for how much teacher that you get to actually fund for that situation. Also for the ESL and LEP, they sent that report over to the LPAC, and they had to go through and make sure that every student was listed on there. And then they sent another report that was SPED LEP and for kids that are double coded to make sure that all of those were in there. They mentioned that they have to verify the campus data, and that they have a representative, which is the person I talked to, that's our PEIMS person, and a chancery clerk that we also have that double check everything. And they have to make sure that they had completed training prior to that, which was online and then also in person from the federal state compliance. And so they had to keep track of that training, and also that was kept in record on technology. But everything that they do is data entry into the system. They have to deliver reports, and they go through all those and print those out, the computerized reports, and they give those documents to the principal or PEIMS coordinator. From that point on, they double check all the data compared to what is stated that we have at the school compared to what's actually in the system. a little error here or there if you don't have somebody marked correctly or you don't have their data incorrectly. Even with attendance, if we're not taking attendance correctly, that can also hurt us. And so we have a daily ADA time she mentioned, which I knew about. It's, second period of every day by 9:30, everybody has to take attendance because that information is taken and reported to TEA on a daily basis, and it's inputted through the computer system so that we can mark how many students we have on a daily basis. And that's why they have that bell go off every day for ADA time. It's not so much that they care about all the other periods, it seems, because the data is only put in one time a day, which is during the second period. But they can't, input that much data 4 times a day when we have 4 classes. So they choose to do the one in the second period, so then you don't, by that time you have kids that are late that are actually there, and you don't have kids that are leaving early. So that's probably the best time, really, for them to input that data. One of the things that they do also for the process, the district process, there's many layers of it that she mentioned, is that they do PEIMS files twice a week on Monday and Thursday, and those are sent out through the student information system, is sent out through email to all the PEIMS coordinators and directors. They use PeopleSoft, which is staff information in combination with our Chancery files to complete staff records. They have the Federal State Compliance Department also that runs HISD files. And then they also have people that are at our campus level, which is the person I interviewed, that reviews error reports and checks with the district files, the compliance, so that it's with the federal, state, and compliance. Then we also have a data team that goes and communicates errors and warnings that can be fixed at the district level, so it won't affect the campus submitting reporting. Any of the problems, they run Chancery reports, which is our main system, and they're able to fix those during fall submission, and they're able to go in and make changes within the certain deadlines. They also review all of the screens for incorrect data, so they have to know how to go through the whole Chancery, which has many different sections to it, because there's a lot of data that's actually on it. When also interviewing the PEIMS person, I asked if they had anything really to do with the actual hands-on financing part. They said that they enter the data. They don't get all those numbers back, individually for how much funding is for each as they're entering it. We actually have a finance department that handles the budget, and it's the finance accountability system resource guide that they use to be able to make sure that they follow the funding, the organization information, the codes, and all the expenditures, which they also have to use computers and do through a network that's in similar files. When they're using PeopleSoft, that's not handled so much at the campus level as it is the district level. The data is used from the campus level, sent over to the district, who uses PeopleSoft to be able to handle all the things that do with, like, employment ID number, demographic information, and responsibilities, payroll, all that stuff. But I did find that it was pretty interesting, though, that there's a lot of responsibilities that are in PEIMS that are not just at one level. It's not just the campus level or the district level. It's kind of shared. Everybody has a little part of their own to kind of do. For student data that the PEIMS person has to put a lot of information in, she has to do the identification with a social security number, or it's a state ID if the person doesn't have a social security. She has to make sure that that data is inside there into our system for Chancery. Demographic stuff like race and date of birth, if they're in the military family, if they have foster care. We also have information such as if they're not an accompanied minor. They have enrollment information that they have to put in: at risk, LEP status, special ed participation, economic status, dyslexia indicator, special programs, and a leaver if they are information from the prior year, the students have not been enrolled for the current year, type things to check out for dropouts also. The staff responsibility at the Chancery level for PEIMS at our campus, she mentioned that she has to obviously generate a lot of the records. She has to make sure that the population is being served by different codes. So, for example, when there's an LPAC and they have to code the kids as being served by ESL. She has to make sure that that data accurately is placed into Chancery and that all students have the correct code, so that there is funding, because a student can be listed as ESL, LEP, and not being served, and so you don't receive the same kind of funding. Same with special ed. If they're not served but they're listed as special ed, there's a different kind of funding coding. And so the total monthly minutes are reported for each class, and monthly minutes are computed for 4 weeks in October. That includes the last Friday of October. So like I mentioned, in a couple of weeks from now, it's October 30th, and that's their snapshot, really important date. Another thing she mentioned too is that they have different codes, especially the homeless or unaccompanied youth, but they also make sure that they have ADA eligibility codes, which is, for the attendance. One thing that I found very interesting too is that they mentioned that that PEAMS has to have a special standardized computer file, and I didn't think that they had to have like a certain file that they send, but she mentioned that our Chancery system that we use for HISD, obviously that not every district uses that, but it has to be accurately compatible with what we're using for TEA and be able to supply them with information. And then she also has the overall PEAMS database where she can go in and she can also find out where a student has been for many years at different districts. She's able to pull that data up. And I thought that was interesting, because for our Chancery that we have for our ability to see within HISD, we can only see data that's within HISD. But with PEAMS data, she's able to go in and pull reports, and I'm able to see where the student has been for different school districts. And then that supplies me with more information, because I might think that I'm getting a student that's first time in the country, but really they're not first time in the country, they're first time in Houston ISD. And then I'm able to see, oh, they were over at this district or that district, and really be able to get a date of when they entered Texas. And so that helps out a lot too. Okay, today I talked to the nurse at the school about what technology that they actually use. And one thing that she mentioned right away was that she has to keep track of all the medications that are given to the students. But she said, first of all, that the parents have to fill out a form along with a physician has to sign it, stating that the student needs such and such medicine at such and such time, and it has to be during school hours. She cannot administer medicine when it is not during school hours. So this form first has to be filled out. Currently she uses a paper form, and then she does scan it in, and so she has a record that is on the computer for all of the forms, so she has proof of that, but she also keeps it in a filing system. So there's not so much technology there. But one thing that she does do with the technology is that she does have a record on the computer to be able to input into Chancery, where she can work with the PEAMS people and then also with the data entry for Chancery. And she can put notifications onto Chancery for students that may have issues such as asthma, and she's able to put that on there if they need certain medications, things like that. That's private information that the students can't see, but that can be accessed by school personnel, so they'll know if there's something that needs to be known, that the student has a medical condition. Not all information is on there. It's usually just a little button at the top where the student's name is on the demographics page of Chancery, and it just kind of says that there is a medical condition. For further information, we would have to actually go to the nurse to be able to obtain a lot of information on that, and she's only going to supply us with information that is important for us to know. Okay, so with that said, also she's in charge of making sure that students take their medication at certain times that are allotted once she gets that document back from the physician and the parent. So what she does is she also, I asked her, what kind of system do you use to remind you that students need the medication, or are they just expected to be coming to you and taking the medication? The students are expected to come to her to take the medication. However, she also uses her Outlook on email to list the times that the students are supposed to take their medication as like a warning reminder for her. And so it pops up as a reminder for her. So she knows if the student doesn't come within that hour time frame, then she goes and gets the student. In order to get the student, then she has to use the Chancery Access system also to be able to look up the student's schedule. And from that point is where she also is able to find the student and where they're located at. Furthermore, she also uses the system to keep track of when she does give the medication. She keeps track on her system for Outlook for the calendar part. Additionally, she has students sign in on paper, but then she keeps a log where she scans those in. It keeps copies of those daily for her own records, and she uses the computer to be able to scan it in. So she actually uses like a copy machine where she puts her ID number in, and then it scans it to her email. She saves it as a PDF, and she keeps those files. Another thing that she does too is that she's able to keep records of when, like, she has situations with the students that are emergencies. And she also uses the Chancery system to look up phone numbers when there is an emergency for a student. So a lot of it's based around the Chancery. But interestingly also is that, she tries to keep Excel spreadsheets, on students of how many times they come to visit, especially if they're not supposed to be in the nurse's office all the time. And then she's able to call parents and say, your student visited the clinic 3 times this week for headaches, and then be able to talk to them about it and have that data information where she can pull it up on her computer. Additionally, during ARDS, which are for special ed, the nurse will come in when it's a medical situation where they need medical information about the student, and she's able to pull up information from her database that she uses to be able to provide that information during ARDS. And that's basically the main things that she does. She does a lot of the data entry that's just basic for her information to know, and then also to keep a reminder for her on calendar times. During my day today, I had the ability to be able to interview transportation. It was kind of a short interview, and it was by phone. The questions that I asked them was how they use technology for transportation, and obviously they said that they input information that tells them which routes that they have per school, and it also allows them to calculate the times that the bus leaves the station for the district and at the time that it arrives to the school, because they have to input that in through the bus driver, and the time that it returns back to the district site. They also handle their own situation with absences, so they do paperwork and they input that into their system and send that in to Human Resources. They also have an online process where people can request the buses, especially for like field trips and things like that. Also for sporting events. So there's a lot of that happening at the schools, especially the high school level. And so you can call into the system and somebody will data entry it in, or we can have access to be able to data entry it in. One person at the school has access. And it's usually the athletic director that handles a lot of that. And so he'll input when the buses are needed, the location that they are, and they do that ahead of time a lot of times, especially once the schedule comes out for the sports or for the special events like UIL and all of that. So those get put into the system and they keep track. They also keep track of which bus number. Additionally, when a bus goes in for maintenance, they keep track of that bus when it entered in for the maintenance, what was done to it, and then also when it came out of the maintenance. So if there were any assignments for that bus entered into the data system, then that bus number will be changed if it's not an available bus. This also helps them keep track of which buses have had oil changes, new tires put on, problems, especially if it's a persistent problem. They are able to keep track of how many times a certain bus has persistent problems. With that said, I didn't realize that there was that much into it. I thought you just kind of called in and they kind of scheduled a bus. I didn't realize they had to keep track of like the maintenance of it, even the gas mileage part of it. They keep track of all of that in their data system. And I didn't realize how much effort it takes into just to request a bus, especially for a field trip. You always think that the hardest part is planning the field trips, but sometimes it's just getting them to be able to have an available bus and to be able to schedule that and for the bus to arrive when it's supposed to and all of that. It's very calculated. And so even the bus drivers have a little bit more to do with the data system when they have to input their information or they call in and have somebody input it for them. Okay, after all of the interviews that I did with maintenance, food services, transportation, human resources, PEMS, and the nurse, I've been able to discover that there's a lot of technology used, different formats. A lot of it does revolve around the student systems that we use so that everybody can have access, which is called Chancery for Houston ISD. But at the same time, there's still a lot of paper being used, a lot of folders and documents and a lot of things that could be really scanned in and placed into the main data system such as Chancery so that just with a click we would be able to access it. For example, with our LEP folders, I've discovered that we have the parent permission letter, we have the home language survey, the test data, all kinds of documents inside of a hard folder, paper folder, and we put them in a filing cabinet. So then when students are transferred from place to place, we have to send that file or we have to make copies and all that. Instead, if we just had on our database system that's for Chancery where we already have their LPAC information and their data, if we just had files already on there where the original LPAC parent permission letter and the original home language survey and original testing were all scanned in, we'd be able to see a lot better. And that goes for a lot of the same different sections that I interviewed. If they were able just to scan in information and save it into files that was a data system that everybody could access, it would save a lot of people time. Also, the use of the files for ARDS and for LPACing, and then a lot of PEMS items that they're saving just for documents, a lot of the human resources information. There are a lot of files that we are using and filing cabinets and space and all of that. If we could instead use it as a digital system, more apt to not being such a folder system, that would save a lot of space and we would have access to it immediately instead of somebody digging it up in a file. So we'd have answers to a lot of our questions immediately and a lot of proofs, especially when it comes time for us to be audited or looked at for any of that. So that would be the big improvement that I would make, is to have more technology, more use of documents, actually being documents that are on files that are scanned in and in the computer system, not so many paper files. And I learned, though, that a lot of the strengths with our technology tools is we do have access to a lot of information, especially, like I said, with our Chancery system and then also with PEMS. I was amazed at how much information we can get from HISD for Chancery, and then even beyond that for PEMS, where we could find out where students have been in different districts for, Texas, and what was their test data there, and all their background information and demographics that we have access to through there, and how the systems kind of collide together, and for a common system that TEAs being able to access. So it's really neat to see how much technology is there. I was also very impressed, like with human resources, of how much technology they have available for usage for employees. So employees can access their employee portal, and there's so many different levels of information that are available there for us as employees, such as our payroll information, W-2s, which come in handy, especially like if you're trying to buy a house or something and you need it right away and you can't get a hold of human resources. I would like to see our service record on there. That you still have to request, and that I found out. But things like that in past paychecks for a whole year's worth are on there. So it's just really great information. The appraisal system for every aspect is on there, where we're going to data entry as teachers and administrators will data entry and to be able to process, and then district level is able to get that information and be able to process the Spire Awards, which is what people get when they do really well on the appraisals and their student performance is good. So it's just amazing. I wonder what would happen if we didn't have all this technology. I can't even imagine how much of a lack of information there was out there when there was not technology available in the manner that we have it today. So this was a really neat discussion that I was able to have and interview several people. And so I think that this improved me as a leader because I'm more aware of how much goes on in each job, and I didn't realize that, but also how much technology and how much training people have to get to be able to use their individual technologies and to become specialists in their area. Thank you.